Hello, everyone. This is Randall D. Stroud, and today we have a very special guest. Today's broadcast is going to go across several platforms. It's going to go on the Nalini Global podcast, which is available on Spotify and every other platform out there. And it's also going to go on my YouTube channel, Followers of the Way. But this guest has an amazing story. She's someone that I got acquainted with doing some of my evangelizing on my Twitter spaces. And, me and her, we can definitely talk about that as well. But I started a Twitter space asking people whether or not abortion was moral. And I heard her story, and she's been in a lot of my Twitter spaces. She's a very godly woman. She reads the Bible quite frequently. She's gone into some of my Bible study spaces, and then one night she just opened up and she told her story about her being a victim of rape and getting pregnant and deciding to keep the child. But it's way more complicated than that. But I just sat back and I listened to her story, and I was just blown away by it. And after we talked, I was like, your story is so amazing, and it's a narrative that doesn't get shared that much because in the media they always say, or they always show the bright side of abortion. And I thought that, and her name is Stephanie, by the way, same as my twin sister. Actually, it's quite funny. But Stephanie, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming on today, and glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm pretty
Yeah,
excited to share my story.
yeah. Even just thinking about everything that you told me that night, whenever we were in that Twitter space, even just thinking about it, like it just totally blows me away because I don't think that you have to go through a situation necessarily to have an opinion on it. But if you've actually lived the situation, it definitely carries a lot more weight. So, Sister Stephanie, and I call you sister because I'm your brother in the body of Christ. We both believe in the same scriptures. Take me back to the beginning. So, you have this childhood, you're just living your life like any other girl. Um, at this point, right before this happens, how old are you?
I was 24 when it first began.
Okay. So you're 24 years old and you're working a job. What kind of job is it?
It was actually a restaurant job.
Okay. So I've worked restaurant jobs before. There's a lot of socializing. Sometimes you guys do things together after work and all this kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna take a step back and shut up for a minute, just let you take us through it. So you're working at this restaurant and just take us through the beginning. What happened? What is your story? What's your testimony?
Okay. So like you said, restaurant folks are usually very close. We went out twice a week at least. Um, and one night we were out doing karaoke night as usual, and I was not really safe to drive, so a coworker offered to give me a ride home.
What do you mean by that? So you went to a karaoke night and you're not safe to drive. So you've had a few drinks,
Yeah,
basically, right?
yes.
Okay.
Um, and I didn't want to drink and drive. Um, and he offered to give me a ride and pretty much insisted on it, really. Um, and so I said yes. I trusted him. We had gone out a few times before, just hanging out. And so he gave me a ride home. And I guess that night he decided we would do other things. So he pulled into my driveway. Um, you know, close friends we always hug and everything before we left work, before we left after hanging out and everything. So I reach over to hug him. And then he just kind of basically hops on top of me in the passenger seat. And it was kind of one of those situations where it just happens really fast and you're shocked and you don't really know what to do or how to stop anything that's going on that you don't want going on. Um, and so he kind of had his way with me, if you will. Um, and then we departed that night. And then at work the next day, he pretty much acted like nothing happened. But then towards the end of the shift, made sure that I knew that it would continue to happen as much as he wanted it to happen.
So
Um,
like, what do you mean what do you mean by that? He
he
was
threatened me and told me I was his, and that when he wants it, he gets it. And um, he was also, at this point, he wasn't quite a shift leader yet, but he was becoming a shift leader. Um, so he was already, making sure I knew that he could get rid of my job, and um, basically just telling me that he at one point did say that he would kill me.
hmm.
Um, and I was just kind of taken aback because it just, when you hang out with somebody and you think you know them, you don't expect these things. Um,
So
so
whenever you went out that night, was he drinking also?
I think he had one beer
Okay. But you were a
or
little more
three.
tipsy.
Yes, I had probably three. I'm 4'9".
Okay.
So
Yes. So
I,
you're a pretty small girl.
yeah, and
So
I had probably three liquor drinks.
so you had some fun doing karaoke. You get a little bit tipsy. I totally get it. I've been there before. And then this coworker, he's had like one drink, which is like basically nothing. And
Hmm.
he offers to be the nice guy and like, hey, I'll take you home. And then he pulls up in the driveway, and all of a sudden he's you know coming on to you, and he's like you said, having his way with you. And then so you go to work the next day and you start talking to each other, and he's making all these threats, sort of throwing his authority around, making little subtle suggestions like, I'm going to be shift leader soon, and I can do this, this, and this, and like you said, even threatening to kill you at some point. Like that's. So, do you feel like you were being groomed?
Um, and yeah, you could say that. He was definitely trying to manipulate me and scare me for sure. And
So,
obviously it worked.
so after this happened, you go to work the next day, and he's saying all these, threatening comments.
Hmm.
What happens next?
Um, he continues like demanding it for a few months, and then that's when I got pregnant the first time. Um, to which I went to my sister about it, and she was the one that kind of, I don't want to say pressured, but she's the one that got me to get the abortion, um, which I really didn't want to do. So I mean, I guess she did pressure me in a sense,
So,
but
so, so this guy that you're working with, he's threatening you, and he's, like, is he threatening you and like inviting you over to his house, and he's saying like, you have to have sex with me and all these kind of things, and is that how it's going down?
he didn't take me to his house. He only took me there once through the whole thing. Um, It was usually like in the car. Um,
Mm.
like it was really weird. I don't. Uh,
So he was just trying to get whatever pleasure that he could, get it over with, and then continue the threats about your job. Like I can fire you, and then threatening to kill you. Like did he ever show you a gun or any kind of
uh,
like physical threats or?
he put his hands around my throat.
Mm,
He was. I don't know exactly how tall. He was very close to like 6 feet. Um, so he towered over me pretty well. So he was very intimidating. He would lock me in the cooler with him, and sometimes he would molest me in there. Sometimes he would just pass threats, making sure that I knew that I would still had to do what he said. Um, there was one time that I did kind of try and be like, I really don't want to do this, but that's the time he put his hands around my throat and was like, "You're pretty much saying you're mine," and letting me know that he
mm.
could do whatever he wanted. Um, I believe he said that he could disappear. Like if he did anything to me, he could just like disappear and nobody would even be able to find him. Um,
And now during this time, like, are you in a financially difficult situation? Like, you need this job like really bad, or
um,
what's
yes and no. Um, at,
because the only reason that I asked that is because a lot of people listening to this story, they might be saying like, well, what stopped you from like maybe going to your family or a trusted friend or even the police? You
mhm.
know, what what stopped you from like taking that action?
um, his threats. He did at one point tell me I couldn't quit, which was kind of redundant if he was going to fire me for not participating. But I guess he knew that if I did quit, that he couldn't get what he wanted. Um, and being that he knew where I lived, I was more terrified of him showing up at my house. Like there were times I would like kind of peek out my window and make sure he wasn't there. Because he would tell me things like, "I drove by your house to make sure you were home," and I'm like,
Mm.
okay. Um, Financially, I probably could have if I wanted to. Um, Part of it was because my sister did get me the job, and I didn't at the time I didn't think that anybody would believe me if I was like, "Hey, he's doing this to me," because everybody adored him because
Mm.
he was one of those. He was very charismatic with people. He joked around with everybody, so everybody loved him, and so I just felt like I didn't really have anyone to go to. And with his threat saying like if I did go to the police or anything, I was afraid that he would be able to like get away and also come to my house.
And
So
you
that's
know
why I
that,
quit.
that's a very fair point because even if you report a crime to the police, you know, there has to be an investigation and all this time has to, like take place before it goes to trial. And it's not like, hey, this person hurt me, go arrest them, and then justice happens in the same day. Like there's a lot of time that happens in between. So you were thinking about all this stuff like my sister helped me get this job. I don't want her to look bad. And this guy could he knows where I live and he could kill me at any moment. He's very
Mhm.
popular. Everybody, like you said, adores him. He's very charismatic. Maybe if I say something, people are going to think that I'm making it up. So you had all these kind of thoughts swirling around in your head, and you were basically paralyzed with fear. Is that like an accurate description of like what you were feeling?
That was like basically how it was every single time. Like when he would get done and leave, like I would like just sit there and cry for a minute before I went home with all like literally all these thoughts just running through my head like what do I do? Like all of it,
Mm.
and it was really rough.
So you and him would just be working together, and he would randomly just be like, "Hey, let's go out to the car," and you knew what that meant.
Yes. We
Wow.
usually work at the same time.
Wow. So this goes on for a couple months, and how do you find out that you're pregnant?
Um, Actually, I got really nauseous, and it lasted for like a week, and I was like, I think I'm pregnant. So I took a test, and I was.
So whenever you saw that you were pregnant, like what, if you even remember, what was going through your mind at that moment? Because it's not like it's some happy moment where it's like, oh, me and my husband are married, and we've been trying to get pregnant for like all this time, and it's this celebratory moment for a lot of people, but for you, you don't have all those positive things surrounding that. So once you saw that that test was positive, how did that hit you in that moment?
It was kind of a. I believe my exact words were, "Oh no, no, no."
Mm,
um, I know I keep chuckling. I'm chuckling because I'm upset.
I
I'm
understand.
just
I'm the same way. I have that nervous laugh, or I laugh, in really awkward situations. So yeah, I totally get it.
um. So yeah, I was very, very upset to say the least.
And
Um.
then so you find out that you're pregnant. What do you do after that point? Like, do you go tell your parents, your sister? Do you tell the guy that was raping you? Uh, what happens next?
I took a couple of days to think about like what to do, and then I went to my sister and I told her. I did not tell her the situation. Um, so another factor into all of this is that he was actually married with a family, and
Mm,
so that was another aspect as to why I didn't say anything, because I was like, not only will nobody believe me, but they're gonna be like, why are you with a married man? And so I didn't tell her that either, because she knew him. She worked there, like I said, she got me the job, um, and she worked with us. I think she had already transferred at this point. She
it's not like you're with a married man. Like, were you guys ever dating at one point?
oh, I meant like if they would have, like, why are you sleeping around with a married man? Had they
I
not
got,
believed, is what I meant. I'm sorry.
I got
Uh,
you. Totally understand.
and so I didn't say anything. I just said I'm pregnant. I don't remember if I told her I didn't know, or I don't remember exactly what I told her, about like the baby daddy, as some people call it. Um, I've really blocked out a lot of things, um, from
Yeah.
all this. Uh, but she was like, she helped me pay for it and everything, and she took me up to the clinic. Uh,
This is your sister that you're talking about.
yes.
Okay.
Um, and the whole time I was like, she couldn't go back with me. You have to go back by yourself. Um, and so I was sitting there after I had talked to them, and I didn't even, like, because they give you. I did the pill, um,
Now,
and they give you
now,
the. I'm sorry. Go
now
ahead.
I want to stop you real quick. So
Hmm.
your your sister, you went to her to get counseling, and you're like, hey, this guy's, like, did you tell her like that you were being raped?
No,
You just, basically said, hey, this guy got me pregnant, and I'm not sure if I want to keep it. And she
I didn't
basically,
know if I wanted to keep it. I just said I don't know what to do, and
okay.
she talked to the abortion.
Okay, so you were confused, and you was like, I don't know what to do, and then she basically brought up the option of abortion and offered to pay for it, and she
Hmm.
drives you to the abortion clinic, and you get there. So whenever you get there, I've always heard that there's like a mandatory like counseling session. Like, did you have to undergo that?
So they have, like, you sit in this one room. There's like three different areas that you go through, or at least where I went. Um, You had to go watch a video about it, and then a doctor comes in and talks to you, and then uh, they give you your first pill because it's a 2 pill process. And then I went and sat in the waiting room after that. And then I think after that they sent me home. I can't fully remember, to be honest.
So
Um, I
um
think the video, it was part of the counseling part because they talk about it and like what the process is and like making sure that's what you want to do and everything.
yeah, and I find that very interesting that a lot of people, a lot of pro-choice, pro-abortion people, they say, "Oh, it's just a clump of cells, it's no big deal," but they have to have a counseling session with you over a clump of cells.
Right.
I've always found that very interesting. So you take these 2 pills.
Well, you take one there and then you take one the next day.
Okay. So
Mhm.
so after all that's completed, let's fast forward maybe like 3 days later, you're convinced that the abortion is, complete. Uh, Once you realize that you're no longer pregnant and you're, cleared out, what's going through your mind at this point? Are you just like, "Oh, um, it was basically a medical procedure, no big deal." Like, were you feeling like any guilt, or like what's going through your head once you realize that this abortion process has taken place?
Actually had instant regret. Um, Even sitting in the back room at the abortion clinic, uh, like even before I actually took the pill, I was like, I don't know about this, but I did it, and then when I went home, I took the second one, and I was like, this sucks. Um,
So whenever you were sitting in that office in the abortion clinic, um, why do you think you were saying, "I don't know about this"?
because I think I knew that even though the way it was explained to me at the time that it was not like a baby yet, so it didn't matter. But at the same time, in my own mind, I was like, something doesn't seem right about that. Um, I was like
What
still
what
thinking baby life, you know,
what were you thinking that didn't feel right about it?
that it was a baby life, that I didn't know if I believed that it wasn't considered a baby life yet.
And this wasn't something that someone told you, but this is just something that you inherently felt on your own naturally.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go home and you take the second pill. A couple of days
Hmm.
go by and you're convinced that the abortion's complete. Now you're feeling regret, like, I'm not sure if I should have done this. Like, so tell me more about that. So 2 or 3 days later, you're convinced that the process is complete. Feeling or
It's very
emotions
obvious.
you're having.
I'm sorry. It's very obvious that it's complete. It's not. It's not exactly like a simple process. I don't want to get like too graphic, but imagine for females that might be listening, it is like your time of the month times 2 or 3.
Mm.
It
So
was for me. I cramped a lot. It was very gross, honestly. Like I'm
uh,
trying not to be like super graphic, but I
well,
feel like
I
they should know.
I can read between the lines, so probably like extremely heavy cramping,
Hmm.
heavy, bleeding, bl- basically you summed it up perfectly. You said basically like a period times 10.
Yeah.
So, wow. So after, you know, a couple of days go by, do you eventually tell your attacker that, "Hey, I just had an abortion"?
I did not. Um,
So he
I
never knew about
actually
it.
was in normal period.
Mm.
But he did try, but I was like, oh, I can't, you know.
So you
Uh,
basically kept it hidden, and
mhm,
whenever he tried to continue to, you know, attack you or force you into kind of like some kind of a sexual situation, you're like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of my period," or so on. Like you basically had some excuse to kind of turn him off.
mhm.
Okay. Did he ever find out about this abortion that took place?
No, my sister was the only one that knew about that.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. A couple
Mhm,
of weeks go by.
mhm.
Um, how
Um,
how long how long after this abortion do the sexual assaults continue afterwards?
about a year later is when I got pregnant again.
I mean, let me reword it differently.
Okay.
You just had this abortion take place.
Mhm.
When was the next time that he assaulted you again, approximately?
Oh, whenever I had stopped bleeding,
So maybe like another like
it's
week
probably
or
like,
two.
yeah, about a week or two later.
So he continues with his same song and dance of, "Hey, let's go out to the car."
Yes.
Okay.
And that was like at least once a week. Sometimes he would go for a few times a week.
Mm. So, and you said that sometimes you'd be like in the storage freezer where you'd hold, like vegetables and different, foods for the restaurant. And you said
Mhm.
like sometimes he would try to, come on to you or like touch you inappropriately, like whenever you went into there and these kind of things.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is going on for a couple months, and then you said about a year later, you get pregnant again. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So what happens this time? Take us through this. So I assume that you're having nausea and all those symptoms again. So you're like, well, I need to go get another pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and for the second time, it says positive. What's
Yes.
going through your mind the second time?
Um, I have the same thought. Um, but I knew then that I didn't want to have another abortion. Um, but I went back to my sister again, and it she suggested it again. Um, at this point, I think I did tell him before I was supposed to go, and I was like, I'm pregnant, but I'm gonna have an abortion because I had just talked to my sister, and he was like, if you do, I'll kill you. And I
So
was
so
like,
so
okay,
you told him this time that you were pregnant,
yes.
and you told him that, or he told you rather that if you get an abortion, I'll kill you.
Hmm. That was
So
his
he
exact.
so he didn't want you to have an abortion.
Hmm.
Wow.
And then my sister was not actually taking me that time. It was going to be my best friend at the time. Um, but I supposedly forgot my ID because you have to have an ID to go through. So I was like, oh no, I don't have my ID. I can't go. And so me and my friend just ended up not going. Um, and I never rescheduled or anything because I was like, I can't. Like I can't do it. Um, so I didn't.
Well, why do you think that he didn't want you to have an abortion?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's pretty strange. Like, you know, I don't know. I don't even want to try to understand that. So
I mean, I
uh,
guess I don't know.
your
I don't.
your so your friend that's talking to you, um, how did this second abortion conversation come up?
Um. Oh, I had talked to my sister again. and told her that I was pregnant again.
And she basically gave you the same sort of speech.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, you forgot your ID and then you weren't able to do it. And then you basically said, well, I'm just not going to go through with it.
Yes. Uh,
So let's fast forward a little bit. You decide to not get the abortion and you're
mhm.
going to work and your stomach's obviously swelling up and getting bigger. Does any of your coworkers notice that you're pregnant?
Yeah.
So
Um,
what do you tell them?
I didn't really tell him much. Um, some of the other Hispanics there would make comments about it being his, um, and I would just kind of brush it off. Um, I found out actually that him and another coworker would make certain comments about me in Spanish, um, in front of the others. So, like, basically degrading me and stuff and acting like they were taking turns.
So
Um,
so whenever people asked you who is the father, what would you say?
um, I didn't really answer. I would kind of avoid it. Um,
You just
the
kind of like
sub,
change the subject or just, deflect.
you know, I would
So
usually just be like, "Oh, it's a Mexican baby," like
mm,
instead of like actually answering it.
so obviously the day comes and it's time to give birth.
Mhm.
And do you go to the hospital or is it like a home birth or
It was the hospital. I had to have a C-section early. She wasn't taken to the placenta, so we had to go ahead and get her out.
so once you give birth and they pull the baby out and they, give it to you and they put it in your arms, what's the emotions that you're having? Like, are you, I mean, I don't want to try to, implant any emotions, so I'll let you tell me.
Um,
Was it confusing at all, or did you just fully embrace it, or like just
well, at the time, I was actually like really, really out of it because they tried to induce me first, so I didn't actually hold her when I gave birth. Because like, so they tried to induce me, and then that didn't work. So then they did the C-section. Um, so I didn't get to hold her. I did look at her because I was kind of in and out, and I did look at her, and all I could think was how beautiful she was. Um, and then when they finally brought her back to me in the room, like I didn't even want her away from me. I just all I did was love her. Like she was perfect to me.
so you're in the hospital and you recover and you bring the baby home. I mean, I want to be very delicate here because I know this is a very sensitive story, and as you're telling me, like, man, this story is just like so heavy because I have a twin sister and her name is literally Stephanie, like you, and
Mhm.
I'm just imagining like if all this stuff happened to my sister, and it's just it, it's a very emotional story to say the least, and it's definitely tugging at my heartstrings. Like as you're telling me this story, I'm just like, so when you go home and you have this baby and you're looking at it, like, is there any part of you that feels any sort of like, I don't know if the right word is anger or remorse or sort of harboring any negative emotions? Because whenever you look at this baby, you have to realize that, well, this baby is also half of the DNA of the guy that's been abusing me.
Mhm.
Does that
Um,
mess with your mind at all, or were you able to separate that?
I've actually always been able to separate it. I wasn't sure if I would be able to because I have read about cases where they couldn't. So I was like, man, I hope that I do okay with her. because I don't want to be that mom that like harbors all this anger and takes it out on her because she didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But no, I did have postpartum really bad, but that had nothing to do with it. That was just postpartum. Um,
Hormones.
yeah, it was really bad. I was actually found crying in the bathroom one time. But it had nothing to do with me feeling any kind of way about that. I still barely even think about it when I look at her. Just maybe recently because I've been trying to share the story so much, but not like when I look at her, but when I talk about it is really the only time that I even connected to. Like I've just cut that line altogether to separate her from him. Um, like I don't look at her and feel anger. I don't look at her and have flashbacks. Nothing. It's just nothing but love.
So whenever you look at your daughter, you don't see yourself or the biological father. You just see a sovereign, independent, beautiful human being.
Yes. I mean, I do see myself because she actually looks a lot like me. Um,
Fair
it's
enough.
kind of scary sometimes, but I mean, yeah, she's 100% her own individual. She's wonderful.
Wow.
She's grown up to be a very godly woman herself, and it makes me so proud, actually.
How old is she now?
She's 8. She'll be 9 in July.
So I have to ask, after you give birth to this daughter, what do you tell this guy who's been abusing you?
Um, he would try and call her his, and I would say no. I'm like, she's not yours. Um, he he did like he made it clear that he wasn't going to help with anything. Um, but he would still try and call it his baby, and
What
so
what
I'd always make sure he
what
knew,
do you mean he made it clear that he wasn't going to help with anything? Like
like
he made
diapers,
some.
and he was like, "You can't put me on child support," and all this other stuff.
Huh,
Um,
wow.
yeah.
So after you get pregnant and you give birth, you're still working there. Uh,
hmm
what happens then? Like, do you continue working that job, or like how do you and him, like how does he end up out of your life?
He got fired actually, surprisingly enough. Um, a lot of drugs started going on around in the building, and he was one of them. And he started showing up to work drunk and sleeping in his car when he should be like running the restaurant. And they finally had enough and fired him. And so that got him out of my life. And then I got to transfer stores, so I didn't have to hear anybody else, because some of them would still make little comments about us and everything. Because I'm sure he told the other Hispanics that worked there that it was his baby. So they would make comments all the time about it. And so finally I was like, I'm transferring, like I'm out of here.
Why didn't you ever think about transferring whenever all these attacks and things first started happening?
It never came up. The store that I transferred to, so when a GM goes on vacation, the other GMs move around to the store that they're in, and they'll spend like a day or two, a week there while they're on vacation. And one of them came and he loved the way I worked, and he said, "Come work for me and I'll make you a shift leader." And I said, "Okay, I'm coming with you."
So
I didn't even know that it was like a thing to just transfer stores, or I probably would have asked to transfer sooner.
so after he gets fired, what's the communication between you and him then?
He showed up once or twice. He had actually moved on, I think, because once I had Isabel, he, I think, was noticing that it wasn't going to happen. Um, and there was other females he could get it from at the time. but he did start showing up drunk. He scared actually one of the cashiers that worked there because he was like hollering through the window for me, and she was like, "I'm walking you out to your car tonight." Um, and then after, I think that was the last time I saw him.
So you have no idea where he's at now.
No, I don't even like the one time he took me to his house. I don't even remember where that is.
Hmm. So how many years ago was it the last time that you saw him?
Um, so probably I guess about between 7 and 8 years.
Is
She
there
was she was still pretty newborn, only a few months old, I think, whenever I last saw him.
so here's the next question that a lot of people would have is um there's no statute of limitations on murder or rape. What
Hmm.
stops you right now from reporting this as a crime?
I guess because, well, for one, I wouldn't really be able to prove it, and for two, I honestly don't even know if he's anywhere even in this state anymore. He could be back in Mexico for all I know.
So was he an illegal immigrant working at this particular restaurant?
Um, I don't know for sure that he was. Um, the way he would talk about how he could just disappear, basically, it made it sound like he was.
Hmm. So
'Cause-
so he basically insinuated that if you ever try to accuse me of something, I can just like run back to Mexico and be gone.
or like just change his name,
Hmm.
like because I know a few that have just kind of came up with a new name and continued working and everything. So I don't know if that's what he meant or if he would just like bail, but he did say he would just disappear.
So now that you're older, and 8 years or 9 years has passed,
Mhm.
obviously, like going back, you would have, you know, done things a lot different.
Yes.
Is that, because a lot of people may be listening to this story and be like, oh, if I was her, I would do this, this, and this. But what people don't realize, and I know this for myself because I've been in a lot of dangerous situations in my life. Me and you've talked a lot. Anyone who's familiar with my backstory, I got shot 2 years ago in a mass shooting,
Hmm.
and I've been in some pretty strange and hairy situations in my life as well. But whenever you're in the moment of something going on, you're not really thinking straight. Like even me for myself, I've been in some toxic romantic relationships that I shouldn't have, stayed in. But in the moment, your mind is clouded, and you have all these hormones and chemicals flowing through your brain, and you're not thinking clearly. But then, 2 or 3 years later, you look back and you're like, what the heck was I doing? So whenever you're in the moment and you're in that situation, it's not always easy to think clearly and rationally. And it's easy for someone from the outside to look into a situation and be like, "Oh, if I was in there, I would do this, this, and this." Yeah, because you're not being emotionally affected in that situation,
Hmm.
you know. So, are you going to try to file or press any charges at this point or anytime in the future, or have you just totally moved on and forgived, or like how do you feel about this person now?
I have forgiven him. Um, I'm praying that he's not doing anything like that to anybody else. Um, I thought it was kind of interesting what you just said because, I have read stories about people being abused by the same person for years, and I thought I would do something differently, and then it happens to me, and I did the complete opposite of what I thought I would do. Like in my head, I would have like punched him or something and ran off. But in the heat of the moment, it's like I froze, you know? And so you really don't know what you're gonna do in these situations. I do wish I did report him at the time, and did not let him continue what he did. But I can't change that now. So I try not to, beat myself up over it too much. Um, but I don't, I haven't really thought too much about if I would still try and press charges. Maybe if I could get it out of my head that he's gone. Um, but as of right now, I would say that I'm not. Um,
Well, and what people don't realize too, because I've worked as a paralegal and private investigator for many years. I've been in the court system, and I hate going to court. It's very stressful. You have to get up there and you have to give your testimony. And even me, I've been hired as a subject matter expert, and I've been in courts. And yeah, it's just very stressful, and it can be embarrassing because you have all those people who are in the court. You don't even know most of these people that are sitting in there, and you've got to tell your whole story and go over every painstaking, detail. And there's all this pressure. You know, are people going to believe you? Are you going to be innocent or guilty? How is it going to go? Is this going to end up in the news? What are people going to think about me? Like all this stuff. So a lot of people just elect to say, you know what, I'm just going to move on with my life, and I don't even want to deal with it in that capacity. Um, so is that kind of like a thought that goes through your mind too? Is even though this guy is a criminal and he's done horrible things to you, you don't want to put yourself through the stress and the agony of maybe being tied up in court for like 1 or 2 years, because these trials can really drag on.
um, I didn't really think about that aspect personally. Um, it would be very difficult, especially because I would have to bring certain people in that I did end up telling about it a couple years after the fact. Um, so it could be very stressful and everything, but at the end of the day, like sometimes it's necessary.
Well, me personally, I would love to see justice, served on this guy. But I know that you're a spiritual person,
Mhm.
and you have your own path and individuality to express, and it's up to you whether you want to take it to that level. But as a person who believes in God, and you as well,
Mhm.
I truly believe that there is a heaven and a hell, and whenever he dies, this guy has to answer and give an account of his life, as what's said in the book of Revelation. Like, do
Mhm.
you agree with that?
Yeah. Uh, God will get his vengeance on him, not me. Um, I have personally forgiven him, and I know that he's going to have to answer to that, and I don't think he will have an actual answer for that. So,
See, I really resonate with you, because I myself, I've never been a victim of rape,
mhm.
but like my story as well. Me being involved in that shooting, that guy shot 8 people, including me, and I was the only one that went into that court and said, "I forgive you. I drop all the charges." And many people said, you know, they thought I was crazy. Like, why are you forgiving this guy? He shot you in the back of the head, and you're telling him that you forgive him. And I wrote him this letter. I tried to share the gospel with him. But I'll tell you something, Miss Stephanie, is that out of the 8 people that he shot, I'm still in contact with 3 of the people that have been shot, and they have PTSD. They're on Xanax, and they're afraid to, leave their house. They have all these mental problems, but I don't have any of that. I'm able to leave my house. I can hang out with friends and go to concerts. I've never seen a therapist, and I actually, in some ways, I've grown better and stronger as a person as a result of that horrible experience. And I think that the reason that I've been able to move on, whereas the other victims haven't, is because I believe in God and I believe in His justice of heaven or hell. And I think that that forgiveness has allowed me to move on with my life, because I know that in the end, we all have to die of something. And in the end, we all have to meet God, and we all have to give an account of ourselves. And the other people that were shot, in my experience, they didn't necessarily have that same faith in God, and they're still angry about what happened. And it reminds me of this Chinese philosopher, Confucius. He said, "If you want revenge, dig 2 graves, one for yourself and one for your enemy." Because being angry at someone is like drinking poison and hoping that it hurts the other person, when in reality, by holding on to that pain, you're just hurting yourself. So this guy, once he shot me, I'm not gonna lie, I was angry at first. Like, I wanted to go get revenge and mess this guy up. But once I came to the decision to forgive him, and like, that's a whole story. I don't want to make this interview about me, but once I forgave him, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but once I forgave this guy that shot me, all the anger and bitterness and resentment, like, most of it just kind of fell away, and I was able to accept what had happened and just um move on with my life and accept what is, and move on with that. So once you made the decision to forgive him, did that make it easier for you to just focus on your daughter?
I think it did, yes. Um, I
Mhm.
surprisingly forgave him fairly quick. I was very mad, for probably her first year of life. Um, still mad at him. Um, but then I just one day I was like, I don't have time to be mad at him. I don't have it in me to just stay mad at him. I have to focus on Isabel. I need to focus on what I'm doing over here, like he'll have to answer to God. So I let it go. And after that, I was able to truly give her what she needed and just be there.
So so, you know, you know that right now there's a huge debate with, the Supreme Court case Roe v. Wade, which may be getting overturned. We don't know yet. It's being re-debated. And you know what's interesting is that, like, are you familiar with that Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade?
A little bit of it, yes.
Well, the woman Roe in that case, she's now a pro-life advocate,
Mhm.
and that's something that Planned Parenthood doesn't talk about. And
Right.
the main argument that was made in Roe v. Wade was, that this woman, like, and she wasn't raped, by the way, but the main argument is that she would be financially hindered and she wouldn't be able to pursue her education in college, and it was going to hamper her lifestyle. And it was upheld that, women have this right, to choose. So let me ask you this, straight up. At what point does a fetus become a human being? Or at what point does life begin in the womb?
I would say conception.
So as soon as implantation happens.
Hmm.
And I like that answer because it's very definitive. Whereas whenever you talk to a pro-choice person and you ask them when does life begin, they always say, well, nobody knows. Well, if nobody knows, then how are we able to make the choice to end life? It's kind of like playing Russian roulette. We may have ended a life, we may have not, nobody knows. But as far as I know, that on average, a heartbeat develops around 23 days.
Hmm.
And there's something about that heartbeat. Like, I know that for your first child, you did have an abortion.
Hmm.
Do you still think about that first child that could have been?
Very often.
So it still like affects you. It's still something that you think about, like, what would it have been?
Hmm. Um, I actually, within the last month, finally forgave myself. Um, but it still eats at me because I could have another boy or another girl with me right now, you know?
Wow. So, you know, I'm a guy, so I'm looking at this from like a completely different perspective. But whenever I look at a lot of these pro-abortion, um, YouTube videos or Planned Parenthood, they say that abortion is just a medical procedure. Now, me myself, I had a wart that was removed from the corner of my eye years ago,
Hmm.
and a wart is just a clump of cells. That's all that it is. And I didn't need to get any kind of counseling session to get this wart removed because it's just a wart. But why is it that we need a counseling session for women to get an abortion if it's just a clump of cells? If it has no value, if it's not life, why do you need to get emotional counseling before you get the procedure done? And something that I've asked a lot of people is, why is it that if a man punches a pregnant woman in the stomach, let's say that she's 6 weeks pregnant, which is not that long. If a man punches a woman in the stomach and she's 6 weeks pregnant and she has a miscarriage, he will get charged with homicide. But
Hmm.
if she pays $500 to Planned Parenthood and a guy in a white coat calling himself a doctor um, kills that baby, then it's not considered murder. Now it's suddenly a medical procedure. So basically, pro choice people are saying that a baby growing inside of you is not a life unless you choose to keep it. So we're allowing women to kind of play God and say, oh, it's a baby only if I love it. But if I don't love it, then it's just a clump of cells.
Hmm.
How is that morally consistent?
It's not at all. A
And
medical procedure would be a C-section, nicely removing a life. That is a medical procedure.
and the other thing is too is you said that the abortion that you had during your first pregnancy, you still think about it and it still haunts you, but that's the opposite of what Planned Parenthood promotes when they say that, oh, it's just a medical procedure, it's no big deal. And you're
Mhm.
not the first woman that I've talked to who has said that. Matter of fact, there's another woman that I know. I'm not going to say her name, uh, but she's in my inner circle of friends, and she had an abortion when she was in high school, and I think she's like 30 or 31 now. But she told me the same thing, that she had an abortion when she was 16, and it still haunts her, and she even has dreams about what that baby could have been.
Mhm.
And it never really made sense to me that when some women say that, oh, this thing growing inside of me is a parasite and it's feeding off of me, and a fetus is not a person until it's viable. But here's my argument is, even after the baby is born, even after it exits the womb and the vagina and it comes out, that baby is still helpless and depends on you.
Mhm.
So, and a child cannot even get a job until they're 18. So children are still dependent upon you until they're 18 and they're old enough to get a job and provide for themselves. Matter of fact, we're not fully developed and formed until we're like 30. Like, the human brain is, the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until around the age of 30. So
Mhm.
this argument that, oh, we can kill the baby because it's not fully developed. Well, we're not fully developed as human beings until around the age of 30, according to the quote unquote science. So, and then the other argument is, well, this baby is has an umbilical cord and it's literally, feeding off of the nutrients of the mother. Well, I don't know about you, but my sister and every woman that I know, if my sister called me right now, and my sister has two children, but if my sister called me right now and said, brother, I'm pregnant, but the doctor says that if I don't get an abortion, then I'm going to die. Most mothers would be willing to sacrifice their own life to save their child. Would you agree with that?
Mhm. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So most of the arguments that pro-choice people come up with is, um, rape, and what if the, baby, maybe, the baby growing inside of the womb had some kind of infection, or the umbilical cord got tangled up and it
Mhm.
was threatening the life of the mother. Well, every mother that I know would choose the survival of the baby over themselves.
Mhm.
And the other thing is that less than, I think, like 2 or 3%. So let's be liberal here and just say 5%. Less than 5% of all abortions are connected to rape or medical necessity to save the mother during pregnancy. But 95% of all abortions are just because some woman, hooked up with someone and she had an unplanned pregnancy and she doesn't want to be responsible for the implications of being a mother, and she just wants to get rid of it.
Mhm.
I really like what the comedian Dave Chappelle said. He said, it, if we're going to be okay with abortion, then, you know, um, if women are allowed to kill the baby, then why don't we let men at least, legally be able to financially uh, abandon the baby and be able to opt out of child support? You know,
Right.
I always thought that was kind of funny. But how do you feel? And I know that this might be a little bit insensitive. Some people might be upset for me asking this, but how do you feel about like what happened with Brian Banks, the high school football player who was, scouted by the Atlanta Falcons and other teams, and he was falsely accused of rape and went to prison for 5 years, and then the woman later admitted to making up the story, and she actually got paid like $1 million by the school system because she sued them for quote unquote failure to protect her because she claimed that the rape happened at the high school campus. So how do you feel like whenever you hear stories about women who lie about being raped and women who trivialize abortion and they say that it's just a clump of cells when you yourself have literally been raped and you chose to keep the baby in spite of it? Like, so like what do you think about when you hear stories like that?
I get really upset. I accusing rape or any sort of sexual assault when nothing happened like that is beyond me. Um, that is so damaging to the other person, financially, their reputation, everything. Like they do not recover from that. And there are so many, like I'm working on trying to help women understand, and men, because it does happen to men, but trying to help people understand that we do need to report accurately, report true rapes and assaults. And then you have these women who fake it, and it really not only hurts them, but it hurts the people that are actually trying to stop real rapes because they look at it as somebody crying wolf. And it really upsets me a lot.
Well, and here's something else that I want to ask you too. Since we're being honest with each other, is what do you think about um, there's this stereotype. I've talked to a lot of feminist and pro-choice people. They say that abortion does not affect men or fathers at all. But I know from personal experience this to be false because one of my family members, a cousin of mine, he was in love with this girl. They were dating, they lived together, and he got her pregnant. And he was happy. And he went and told all of his coworkers, "Hey, I'm going to be a daddy." And she was seemingly okay with it too. But then I guess she started having second thoughts. And then one day she calls him up while he's in the middle of his work shift. And she says, "Hey, I got to tell you something. Um, I'm not ready to be a mom. So I went ahead and got an abortion." And he said, "Well, why didn't you talk to me about it first?" And she said, "Well, this is what I decided. So it is what it is. You just need to accept it. And it is what it is." And I watched him cry, and it emotionally affected him pretty bad. And he was like, "I was going to be a father. Like that was my DNA that was inside of her. And it was growing like that was my child." And that was back in 2008. I was pretty young back then, but he still talks about it to this day about how he almost became a father. He recently got married a couple of months ago, and now he is going to be a father. Uh, you know, praise God. But for years, that haunted him. So, um, what do you think about that? About women who I'm not talking about women who've been raped or anything, but women who are in a consensual relationship with a husband or a very close boyfriend, and they get an abortion without consulting their partner. Do you think it's possible for that father or that husband who does care about that woman and the baby to be emotionally affected?
Absolutely. I feel like men are often kind of ignored in these situations. Um, with all of it, with rape, abortion, it's like people act like men aren't affected by any of this, and they absolutely are. And for a woman not to speak to her man about it, that breaks my heart. I With a consensual man, I would never ever just go have an abortion and be like, hey, sorry. There are so many options that they could do if she's not ready to have a mother, or be a mother. Um, there are options for literally everything, and that just breaks my heart because a man can be just as damaged as a woman, and I see that a lot. Like when people are arguing, they'll be like, "You're a man, you can't be in this conversation." Why can't they? Because that could be literally, like you said, that could be their child that somebody aborts, and that will crush them mentally, emotionally. That could even affect them spiritually, and people don't think about these things.
Well, I'm really surprised to hear you say this because after what you've been through, you have every excuse in the world to become like some man-hating feminist and just, you know, be afraid of men or to not see any sort of perspective from like the the male side of things. But your level of maturity and your ability to see all angles of everything just completely blows me away because to me, I hate to say this, but to me, you have every rightful excuse to hate men and to never ever trust a man ever again, but yet you're able to remain objectively consistent in your logic and your ability to see what's true and what's not. Because a lot of people who have been, I see this all the time. So like in my situation, for example, the guy that shot me was a member of the Black Hebrew Israelites, and they believe that white people and Asian people can't go to heaven, and they're determined to go to hell. Well, after that guy shot me, you know, maybe some people will have some motivation to like not trust black people, or like you hear stories about black people being mistreated by a white person, and then they spend the rest of their life like not trusting white people, or like in your case you've been raped by a man and you spend the rest of your life like hating men or not trusting men. um, but it's like somehow or another you've been able to like separate this one bad guy from all men. Was that
Mm.
something that was immediate and apparent, or was that like a process where you had to like relearn or reevaluate like being around the male gender?
Um, it's kind of hard to say. Um, I don't know if you know. I posted my whole story on Twitter,
I saw
which
that.
also mentioned other men that I encountered. Um, I don't know if you saw the whole thing. There was a second abortion in there that I was pressured into by another man who was the father of it. Uh, that one was very, 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 very tough. Um,
Mm.
I've been very hurt by men, but at the same time, I have seen good men. I wouldn't say good because no man is good, but
Except
on
for
a
God.
earthly level, um, I've seen decent men. I've seen the way a man can truly treat a woman or people in general. So I know it's not every man. Um, I seem to have a habit of catching the bad ones. Um, but I can't hold all men accountable for what a handful of men did to me. That's not right. Um, So I will not do that. Um, I forgive those men for everything they've done to me. Um, but you can't hate everybody because of one person. You just can't.
You're gonna make me cry, because that I've seen that play out so many times because I was a white guy that grew up in a mostly black neighborhood and and went to black schools. And I remember being told growing up, like, oh, your ancestors enslaved us and you're this and that. And I'm thinking like I wasn't even born then. Like I don't know what you're talking about. Like I just want to be a kid,
Right.
and um, I don't want to get beat up or blamed for like something I wasn't a part of and don't even agree with. Like I think it was awful too. Like I'm with you, my brother. Like I agree. Like that was awful. And I see some men too. Like so, we talked about hyper feminism a little bit
Hmm.
earlier. But like, have you ever heard of this group called MGTOW?
Uh, that's the men, right?
Yeah, like they're basically like the male version of feminism. So like feminists blame all of the problems of society on patriarchy and male dominance and men this and men that. But the MGTOW movement are a bunch of guys, and they point out some of the injustices of the family law courts and the divorce systems, which do oftentimes favor women. But they kind of exaggerate it, and then they kind of blame all of the world's problems on women. And I just see like MGTOW, which stands for men going their own way. I view the MGTOW community as kind of being like the two sides of the same coin as feminism, where the feminists kind of like, you know, chop their hair off and try to be more masculine, and they're like, yeah, men are the problem of everything in the world. And I went through a really bad breakup when I was in my 20s, and I discovered that MGTOW movement. And for like a couple of months, it seemed really cool. It was like, yeah, those dang women. Yeah, man, they're so crazy. But then after a while, it just started seeming like really toxic because I was like, well, there are some crazy women in the world, just like there's some crazy men. But after having this really bad dating experience with this woman, I was listening to these MGTOW guys talk about how like women have certain privileges in society and blah blah blah, and it all sounded really good. But then I started thinking, I was like, well, uh, there's some crazy women in the world, but my mom is a woman and she's a pretty good person, and my sister is a woman and she's been with the same guy since she was 18, and she treats him really good. So this ideology that says we should blame women for everything is obviously not true. And then, I kind of took a step back from it, and I look at feminism like kind of the same way is yes, everybody has certain privilege in society. Like men get judged unfairly for certain things, and women get judged unfairly for certain things. But like you said earlier, just because some men do these awful things doesn't give us the right to make like an indictment against the entire sex of males.
Hmm.
And that's pretty impressive that despite the atrocity of what you went through, you were able to separate this one horrible low life guy from, the other men that are doing what they're supposed to do as decent men. And it's
Hmm.
very impressive that you were able to distinguish that, because I don't think that a lot of people would be able to. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if you did hate men after what you've been through. So it's very impressive that you've been able to separate your emotions from reality. So let me ask you this, because we've been going for a bit over an hour now. I don't want to keep you for too long. What would you say to any, woman listening to this who maybe just found out that she's pregnant, and maybe she's, maybe it's not as bad as what you went through. She hasn't been raped, but maybe she's just poor. She's working at McDonald's. She doesn't have a lot of money, or it's an unplanned pregnancy, and she's like, well, it's just, this thing growing inside of me is a big inconvenience. I'm thinking about getting an abortion. What would you say to this person?
I would definitely say to stop and really think about it. Um, there are so many options that can be taken, that does not have to end the life of a precious child. Um, whether it's rape or you just don't think you can. Um, there are foster programs, adoption, and if you're worried about things not working out, it will work out. And I see it every day. Um, you know, don't let somebody else pressure you into it. Um, don't listen to anybody else. Maybe if you're with somebody, listen to only your spouse or your boyfriend, and really talk with him and just discuss this together, and just don't rush, because what they don't tell you is that it will affect you. It can affect you physically if you do want to have children in the future. It can definitely affect you mentally. I'm in contact with several women who have been just driving ourselves crazy for years, decades, because of one, some of us two. Um, it's not a light thing to do. And I really, really, really think you should reconsider doing this. Um, and just please remember that there are other options.
But now, what about something that's more severe? I mean, a young woman just, she's at some club, some guy drugs her, and drags her back to his house or hotel or whatever it is, and rapes her,
Mhm.
and she doesn't go to the doctor, she doesn't tell anyone, she's scared. A couple of weeks go by, she finds out that she's pregnant, and she's like, oh, I don't want to give birth to, you know this baby that has the same DNA as the man who raped me. I don't want to keep this thing. It's just a medical procedure. But I think what you said was very powerful, where you said, that it's going to affect you. And I think that that's the part that women don't realize, is because I've seen some TikTok videos and YouTube videos. Like, there's this one particular woman. She filmed herself getting her fifth abortion, and she was laughing and smiling during the procedure. But I guarantee you that she wasn't laughing and smiling the first time that it happened. Like, the more something happens, we start to get numb to it, and we just kind of, get calloused, and we just kind of accept it.
Mhm.
So if a woman has been if a woman has been raped,
Mhm.
let's imagine that a rape just occurred. The guy, finishes, and then he takes off. What should that woman do right after?
She should go straight to the hospital. Um, they have ways they can help you. Um, report it. That is a major issue, is us not reporting it. But they can give you something to prevent a pregnancy to begin with. If it has gone past that, there are still options out there.
Yeah, reporting is a big thing. Like, if you know for a fact, because the thing about rape versus sex is consent.
Mhm.
So if you've been drugged, if you've been threatened, and you've been coerced into doing this kind of, activity, then you're a victim. But now, if you're out here just sleeping around and hooking up with people, and then some kind of, accident happens, then it's still the same situation. Whether it's a rape or it's not a rape, there's still a potential life that's happening.
Mhm.
But like you said, taking action
Mhm.
is key. Because, like you said, if you are a victim of rape, you can go to the hospital and they inject you with this estrogen hormone, and it can prevent implantation.
Mhm.
And that's effective up until the like first 24 hours.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you one more topic before we get ready to close out. Is, dealing with these issues is hard enough, but now looking back on everything that's happened, what would you say are some things that people could do maybe as a preventative? Like, what are some red flags or things that, maybe people should do to, sort of reduce the chances of ending up in these situations before they escalate to begin with?
Um, are you referring to like the rape?
I know that every situation is different. Like, there's some people that are just walking down the street and they literally get kidnapped, and there's not a whole lot you can do. But looking back on your particular experience, what do you think are some things that you could have done to maybe put a halt to things now that you're older and you can look back with more wisdom? Like, how would you have handled that situation differently?
Um, I would have definitely reported him. Even if not the first time, if he like knowing that he proceeded to do these things, I would definitely have reported. Um, I know court sounds scary and even the threats are scary, but thinking about the fact that A, he's not going to be able to hurt you anymore, and B, he's not going to be able to hurt anybody else. And for those of you who don't report, we really need to think about that because we need to prevent them from continuing. Because most people don't just do it to one. Um,
That's true.
so I would definitely have reported, maybe even told somebody I trusted. Um, you know, I did have a lot of close friends. I should have gone to somebody and been like, "Hey, he's doing this, this, and this. What do I do?" Which they probably would have said, "Report him." um, so, I mean, that if I could redo it, I would definitely.
But like we talked about earlier, and I didn't ask that question to, you know, um, make it sound like, oh, victim blaming or something like that. But I totally get it. Like, when you're in the situation, it's hard to think clearly and to see the situation for what it is, versus 10 years later. It's easy to look back and be like, oh, I should have done this and this and this. But that's why we're having this conversation as a warning to anyone who might be listening, any young ladies out there, or even young men. And
Mhm.
maybe this is where I can give some good advice. So I always tell young men that I mentor, I'm like, don't have sex at all with a woman if you or her have any alcohol in your system. Now, it's different if you've been married and you have this established relationship and, so on and so forth. But if you're just in that dating phase or it's your first time hanging out, don't even drink alcohol. Like, go on a date and have a cup of coffee. I mean, if you have alcohol in your system and she has alcohol in her system, then things get real dicey. So just do things the right way. And I'm a biblical person, as are you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's why God said to not have sex before marriage, because it makes things clear. If you get married, there's a commitment that is put in place. Everyone knows where they stand. Then you can enjoy all the sex that you want. But, people are in this kind of like hookup culture. There's all these, weird things going on, and things get, really clouded. But like what happened in your situation, you didn't ask for any of these things to happen. So, you know, you're innocent, and you shouldn't feel bad or guilty about everything. This guy knew what he was doing. He took advantage of the situation. And like you said this guy was like, what, you said 6'8"? Did I hear that right?
No, he was around 6 foot.
Oh, okay. So, and you're like 4'11". He's,
Um,
he's this guy that's towering over you, and he's making all these kind of threats. I mean, being in that situation, in the time and in the moment, like, yeah, I could definitely see you being paralyzed with fear. But like you said earlier, 8, 9 years later, when you're far removed from the situation, it's easy then to look back and be like, oh, well, I should have just did this or did that, because yeah, now you're not, you you don't have those emotions that are clouding your judgment and everything. So I'm glad that you've had the bravery to speak out. I mean, your story is absolutely amazing. And I think that this narrative is a narrative that needs to get shared more often, because when it comes to abortion, the way it's being promoted is it's just, oh, it's just a medical procedure. You just go in here and it's like getting a wart removed. But after hearing your story, it doesn't sound like it's just getting a wart removed, because there's emotions that are attached to this event. And
mhm,
I really appreciate you opening up and sharing these things. I mean, it really is a heart-wrenching story. But now this daughter of yours, she's 8 years old and everything. So I want to ask one more follow-up question.
mhm,
If you don't want to dig into it, that's fine, because I want to be very respectful of your situation.
mhm.
But I know this is a question that a lot of people are probably going to be thinking about, and it may even contribute to their decision to have an abortion. But I'm not even sure if I want to ask this, but like, have you already had the conversation, or like, how do you explain the situation to that child? Because at some point when they grow up, they're going to be asking about the circumstances of their birth, like, who is my dad? Have you already started to explain that situation, or do you have a plan put in place to kind of, lay that foundation, or like, how do you deal with that?
Um, she she knows that, like, because she has a brother, and she knows that she's different. Um, because she is half Mexican. Um, I haven't explained to her exactly why yet. Um, my plan is to wait until she's a little bit older and can understand it better, but I do plan to have that conversation with her, but gently, um, because I know she will ask, and I think it is fair to be honest with our children. I don't lie to her about anything. Um, and so I will have that conversation with her. Um, but it's just something that you have to be gentle with and make sure that she understands the same way that I understand that there can be no hate in it, that there's nothing wrong with her. She's perfect. Um,
Hmm.
some people are like, they call children conceived of rape evil. No, they're not. She's fantastic. She's amazing. She's a gift from God. Um, and she will know these things. But I am going to be honest with her about it.
Wow. Wow. Like I'm like fighting back tears right now. Like it's just that wow. Huh. The like I know that my mom loves me. I mean, she gave birth to me. She's my mom. She's always been there. But it's like I feel like in your situation, according to the world's standard, you had every excuse to abort this child. And like, you know, maybe some people would judge you, but a lot of people wouldn't. They'd be like, "Yeah, you got raped, and yeah, it's totally understandable." But it's like, I feel like in your situation, your love is on another level because despite this ugly situation, you really chose this child and you saw the beauty in her sovereignty as a human being. And that's just incredible. Like me even trying to fathom it is just like contorting my spirit because I feel like I am a fairly empathetic guy and I can close my eyes and try to put myself in situations and trying to do that, put myself in your shoes, like wow, I'm almost at a loss for words. So I hope that you're able to, articulate that to your daughter and maybe when she's much older, she can go back and listen to this interview that we're having because the amount of love that you must have had for her despite this ugly situation to choose her anyways, that requires an insane amount of not only love but just empathy for life because you recognize that she was a sovereign human being growing inside of you. And this is an argument that really bothers me a lot is if a single mom gets pregnant and she's poor or comes from like a really bad background, oh, that baby's going to grow up and be a loser anyways. Like, it's not going to amount to anything. But then I think about someone like Manny Pacquiao. I'm not sure if you know who he is, but he was a boxer in the Philippines, and his mom, gave birth to him, and the father abandoned him and his mom, and he grew up in extreme poverty. Like the Philippines is a really poor country, and he
Mhm.
said in his documentary he literally ate like a can of biscuits a day, and that was it. So dude was like malnourished and everything. Eventually becomes an 8 division championship boxer, becomes a politician in the Philippines, and he's like one of the world's most famous people. And now his father wants to claim him. Oh, very convenient. So, and then I hear stories about like people that were born with no arms. Like there's this guy on YouTube. He was born with no arms and legs,
Mhm.
and his parents were faced with the choice to abort him, and they chose to still give birth to him. And
Mhm.
now he's like a famous motivational speaker, and dude's like a millionaire. So it's like we don't know someone's potential. And I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan. I don't agree with all of his politics. I'm not going to say he was like, the best president ever. But Ronald Reagan had a really good quote about abortion. And he said, um, what's funny about abortion is that everyone who is for abortion has already had the privilege of being born.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a really powerful statement is I get it. Like life is suffering. Like I would say that like 80 to 90% of life is difficult. Like every morning that we wake up, we have to brush our teeth and we have to, wash ourselves and feed ourselves and just maintaining ourselves is a lot of hard work. Like being alive is not easy, but it's still a gift because me personally, I don't want to give my sob story on here, but I've been through a lot of stuff in my life too, like very painful stuff. There's even been times where I went to my parents and I said, I never asked to be born, and I told my parents that I was angry at them for giving birth to me because I was like, if it wasn't for you giving birth to me, I wouldn't be dealing with this horrible situation right now. And I even made my mom cry one time telling her that. But then you know what happened? 6 months later, something good happened to me. I got a new job. I got a new girlfriend. Something, pleasurable happened to me. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, thank God that I was born. Life is amazing. So it's like we tend to curse our existence when bad things are happening, but when something good happens, then suddenly we're grateful to be alive. So
Mhm.
I really do think that we take for granted the gift to be here, because not everyone gets to be born. Not everyone gets to experience this holy existence that we call human reality. And the fact that you do have this daughter, we don't know what her potential is and her capability is. What did you say her name was?
Her name is Isabel.
Isabel.
Mhm.
Well, I'm praying for Isabel that she grows up and becomes a fine woman and that she accomplishes like so many things. Like she's going to be in my thoughts and prayers. And I'm glad that you decided to not kill her. I'm glad that you decided to give birth to her, and maybe one day I'll you know have the pleasure of this interview being played back to her whenever she's a fully grown adult woman, and I'm sure it'll bring tears to her eyes that her mom quite literally chose her be here out of love and respect. And I think that your story is absolutely beautiful and amazing. And I just want to end this interview by saying that despite my views and your views and everything that's been said here, any woman that has had an abortion, I'm not here to judge you. I don't believe in this word judge. Judge is a legal term, and God is the ultimate judge, and only He can sentence someone to heaven or hell.
Mhm.
But all we're doing is offering information and a gentle rebuke. Rebuke means to correct.
Mhm.
And I hope that any young woman or even some men listening to this can maybe learn something about how to treat women respectfully. That life is precious and there is a sanctity to it, and we need to think about these things much deeper, because again, I want to repeat it one more time, like what Ronald Reagan said, everyone who is for abortion has already been born. We're already here, we've already had the privilege of being born. We need to grant that same opportunity to these kids that are in the womb. It's really, quite that simple. So despite all the horrible things that I've been through, the amazing opportunities that I've had, like what I'm having right now, interviewing you, talking to you, um, it really does bring significance to our lives. And yeah, so thank you for sharing your story. Do you have any kind of like final thoughts or words that you want to pass on before we close out?
I do want to talk to any ladies or men even who are listening that did already have an abortion or even maybe more than one. Um, I don't know for sure that you're a Christian or a Christ follower, but I just want you to know that, when we repent these things, God does forgive us. And
Amen.
we need to forgive ourselves as well and know that when we get to heaven, we will see those babies again and we will get to finally meet them and love them like we should. So
Amen.
worry too much about it now. Just keep on praying and we'll get there.
It says in the book of Jeremiah, God says that I formed you in the womb.
Hmm.
I already knew you. So it's like that statement's pretty powerful. So anyone that is not an atheist and believes in God, and they read that verse, that I formed you in the womb, that gives you inherent value. And again, I just want to reiterate that, like, anyone listening to this, if you've already had an abortion, I don't know what your mental state was. So, like, I'm not here to judge anyone or to shame anybody, because me myself, like what you said earlier, I really like that you suddenly brought up that verse, because you were saying that there were good men in the world. Then you corrected yourself and said, well, let me take that back. There's no good men, there's decent men. I think that may have went over some people's heads, but what you were referring to, and I know what you were referring to, is that Bible verse when Christ is approached by the young rich man, and he says, "Good teacher, how can I inherit the kingdom?" And Christ responds and he says, "Why do you call me good? No man is good except for God." Because our standard for good our standard for good is, well, I've never killed anybody, so I'm basically a good guy, right? But God's standard for good is moral perfection, and none of us can claim that.
Yep.
All of us have lied at some point. We've stolen something. We've looked at someone with lust that we weren't married to. We have all done something negative. So, like, none of us can claim to be good, because according to God, good means perfect. But with that being said, you hit the nail on the head, Sister Stephanie, is that the key is intention, your intent. So if you're actively in repentance, and you feel sorry for the things that you've done, and you recognize the mistakes that you've made, and you're actively trying to correct them and to be better, then I think that that's where the blessing begins. And I truly believe that this interview that we're doing here is a part of your repentance, because who knows, Sister Stephanie, that at some point someone may be listening to this episode and you could very well be preventing an abortion from happening. So who knows? Perhaps, like, I don't understand God. I don't understand his plan, because arguably most humans only live to be 70 or 80 years old. Compared to the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to be here very long, and neither are you. But if we zoom out hundreds or thousands of years, who knows? Those things that you endured may be a part of some threaded story meant to be used as a message to save other people. We don't know, but we're here and we're trying. And I think that your story and your message is going to, if not save or stop people from getting these abortions, it's definitely going to give a different perspective and get people to stop and think, because not all abortions are just easy peasy, simple little medical procedures, but it's a lot more complicated than that, physically and emotionally. So we'll go ahead and close out. So if there are any people out there who want to ask more questions, or perhaps just want to be friends with you, or are going through something similar, or maybe they've already got an abortion and they just need to talk to someone to relate to try to get healing, is there any way that people can reach out to you through, like, social media or email or anything like that? Would you be willing to share any of that information?
Yes, I have Twitter, and my username there is avocado flower, but it's AVA instead of AVO, but avocado flower. And it'll say Sister Stephanie on there, and that's the only social media.
and people will be able to see the video version of this on YouTube. So, like whenever we talk, our profile pictures kind of like highlight and like light up. So the profile picture that you're using for this discussion, people will be able to see it on YouTube, and you'll have that same profile picture, I'm assuming, on your Twitter profile.
Yes, it's the same one.
Yeah. So yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. Honestly, this interview could easily be 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 hours, because like this is a very deep topic. I know that we kind of skimmed over a lot of things, but your story is absolutely amazing, and thank you for just giving us a different perspective, and thank you for your bravery also, because I know that me and you have had some discussions in private, and you've kind of been, playing with the idea
Hmm.
being an advocate and speaking out and telling your story. And I know it's not easy, because there's probably going to be some people that's going to listen to this story, and maybe they're going to have some kind of negative opinions or something to say about it, but that comes with the territory.
Hmm.
All in all, what you're doing is extremely courageous and brave, and I think that you're going to change a lot of hearts and a lot of perspectives, and give a more complete and robust understanding of this complex situation that you went through. So it's, again, thank you so much. I'm completely humbled and honored that you would trust me and open up and share this with me.
Thank you. I really appreciate you helping me to start my journey on getting it out there.
Yeah, and yeah. So just real quick, if you have like just like 2 or 3 more minutes,
Mhm.
how did you even discover me at all? Like, I have to hear this real quick.
Um, that's a good question. I think I just found you like on a space. I had just recently discovered that spaces were even a thing on Twitter. I had started going to what's called the Sabbath gathering, and then I saw other spaces on there, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And I clicked yours, and I just started listening, and I have loved your spaces ever since, and I go to pretty much all of them.
Well, you know my testimony, and the uh the things that I've endured to come to the knowledge of the truth, and that makes things even more beautiful. Like, I went through my struggles, my testimony about getting shot. I know about your testimony, dealing with this rape and all these kind of things. And it's just like, it's so crazy how these tragedies lead us to these places of like extreme spiritual awakenings, where and I've wrote about this a lot in like some of my books, but this is something, this is your homework assignment, Sister Stephanie, is I want you to Google this term, uh post traumatic growth. It's the opposite of you've heard of PTSD, right?
Mhm.
Well, post traumatic growth, or PTG, is the opposite of PTSD. So
Mhm.
approximately 11% of people that undergo traumatic experiences actually become stronger and more aware people than they were before this event happened. Whereas approximately, you know, 80 to 90% of people, after undergoing a traumatic event, they get PTSD, they become worse people, that they become weakened because of what happened to them. So it sounds like to me that you've experienced post traumatic growth, and it's really amazing. So yeah, everybody go check her out on Twitter. Again, that's at avocado flower, that's spelled with an A instead of an O. And just talk to her, DM her, send her a message, open up to her. And yeah, I'm glad that you discovered me on Twitter and come into some of my spaces and hear some of my biblical rants about life issues, and I'll definitely be seeing you and talking to you again.
Yes, sir. Thank
All
you.
right, so uh, thank you, everybody. This has been an amazing episode. Make sure that you share this video and this interview with other people, and tune in next time. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless and take care.